All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. Welcome. Welcome to a wonderful, we hope, what will be a wonderful webinar that is going to be focusing on something that, at least in New York State, has been the topic of much conversation, which is the overall process of evaluating direct support professionals using the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities direct support professional evaluation tools. My name is John Raffaelle, and there I am. Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, or I'm sure most of the people that are on this webinar are probably in New York State, so I'll say good morning to you all. My name is John Raffaelle. I work as an independent consultant, and I work with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. I've worked extensively with the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, and certainly our friends and partners at NYS over the last several years in creating what we hope will be a significant contribution to the development of direct support professionals in New York State. And what that's about is all about the workforce transformation that's upon us. The last 5 years, certainly in New York State, but around the United States, we have seen all types of initiatives take place that are addressing the concerns of the direct support professional workforce. We could spend a webinar on the issues in and around the direct support professional crisis that exists in the United States. But that's not the intention for today's webinar. Today's webinar is focused and will be focused specifically on using our core competencies that have been developed by the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, certainly using the NADSP Code of Ethics, which has been adopted and has been adopted by New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. It was adopted in 2012. We'll talk about that a little bit, but ultimately the real focus of today's webinar is going to be how we use the tools and the competencies to develop and educate our direct support professional workforce. So that said, here are today's objectives. And probably throughout, the theme throughout this whole webinar will be all about our responsibility to develop direct support professionals. Now, that's not limited to just frontline managers and supervisors, because the reality is frontline managers and supervisors of direct support professionals, they will be primarily the people responsible for doing the evaluations, the annual evaluations, initial evaluations. We'll get into that in a little bit. But ultimately, yes, frontline supervisors and managers, yeah, they're going to be probably the first contact and the first go-to when it comes to the evaluation process for direct support professionals. But I like to, and I believe that it's beyond those people in our system in terms of developing direct support professionals. It's on all of us. It's on the executive administration of organizations. It's on the allied professions within our field, meaning psychologists and social workers and service coordinators and certainly nurses and all those other professionals. At the end of the day, have a responsibility to help develop direct support professionals, and we'll talk about that. But the one thing that really we see has been a wonderful development in the development of direct support professionals is the development of the core competencies and the evaluation tools, which we're going to get into today. I'm going to show you real concrete ways in terms of how to locate, yes, how to locate, but also how to use those evaluation tools. There's word on the street out there that these are complicated and very bureaucratic forms. And yeah, they might be a little intimidating when you look at them initially, but really when you get into the essence of what they are, I believe, and I know because I've used them, they will absolutely reduce the workload for frontline supervisors and be wonderful vehicles in that development process for direct support professionals. So we'll talk about that, but we're going to how to locate and how to use those tools, where they are, where you can find them, how to use them. Want to spend some time and show you the workforce transformation website, which many of you probably got to this webinar via that. But I do want to just spend a moment just to look through that website and to show you how valuable it is, but also within that website, probably it rests on the core competencies that have been developed by OPWDD, and we're gonna look at those. And I'm going to show you a PowerPoint actually that you all can use that really helps demystify those core competencies, and we'll take a look at that. And there's, as I said, we're going to look at that workforce transformation website, which I believe it's a treasure chest. It's absolutely loaded with wonderful resources that you can use that are free of charge, that can really help you translate these competencies and certainly help you develop your direct support professional workforce. And I'm hoping the objective of by noon Eastern Standard Time, everybody that's participating, you'll understand much more about those evaluation tools and the evaluation process. So hopefully you're all excited for the next 50 minutes. We're going to dive deep into the weeds of the evaluation process, at least for direct support professionals in New York State. It's a beautiful thing, if you ask me. We've got to start really and just set up a little bit. We've got to set the table, why we're doing this, why there is a workforce transformation, a system transformation. We in New York State have frequently, if we've worked as direct support professionals, if we've worked in provider organizations and agencies, if we've been recipients of services as people with developmental or intellectual disabilities, we know that transformation happens frequently. It's almost, I think transformation maybe is an ongoing process that we need to come to terms with. Because if we're not constantly transforming what we do, we can fall victim to I guess, complacency. We can fall victim to lack of progress, and all those things. But that said, there is a specific transformation taking place in New York State. We know that the community rule, the home and community-based services community settings rule, as it's called, is happening. And by March of 2019, every provider in the United States is going to have to follow some new rules, which are ultimately, when you look at them, they're all about being person-centered and being equal with the people that we support. But when we look at transformation in the system, and when we look at these tools in a few minutes and the evaluation process, here it is. You've probably seen this, Joe Macbeth and I, through the NADSP, probably a lot of you know our message. And if you don't, this is kind of the essence, one of the pieces of our message that we spread all throughout the country. You can't do today's job as a direct support professional with yesterday's methods and be in business tomorrow as a direct support professional or as a provider organization supporting people with developmental disabilities. We're going from a paradigm of caregiving, which we've done very well for the most part, to we're shifting to becoming a direct support culture. And support is different than care. Support is all about walking in alliance and in allegiance and in partnership with people, as opposed to controlling and dictating what we believe is good for people. As you're going to see when we look at the core competencies and the evaluation tool, the foundation, the spirit, the soul of that tool, the soul of the competencies, if you will, are all about that. They're all about being in partnership and being a direct support professional. Our friend Perry Samowitz has created lots of things, which I'll show you, lots of training videos specifically on this paradigm shift, and we'll see that in a few moments when we look at the workforce transformation website. But ultimately, this is a theme that we need to embrace. And we talk a lot about quality in our system. We have quality assurance, quality insurance, quality improvement, you name it. We talk about quality a lot. We define it very simply at the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, not by paperwork. Paperwork's important. Documentation, as you're going to see, is a competency set. It's a skill set. But ultimately, we don't define quality ultimately by that. We define quality at the point of interaction between a staff member and an individual with a developmental disability. That comes from the founder, essentially the ideological founder of the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, John F. Kennedy, Jr. And this statement is a statement that many of you probably are familiar with if you've had any interaction with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. But I think with these two themes, these are the two themes that we want to see go through as we talk about this evaluation process. There's John's vision. There's John F. Kennedy, Jr. on the right, handsome fellow that he was. Sadly, he died in 1999. But the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, his organization, did not die. But what he wrote in 1996 is really part and parcel to why we're doing this evaluation process now. And he wrote to President Clinton when he served on President Clinton's committee, as what it was called then, the Committee on Mental Retardation. Now it's the Committee on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. He wrote this to President Clinton: we need, as a society and as politicians and as lawmakers, to develop a comprehensive agenda, inform public policies, and effective strategies to strengthen and redefine the emerging role of direct support professionals. Interestingly enough, we can almost say that same statement now, 20 years later, but what New York State has done, and we should be proud of the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, they have put, in essence, their money and their ideology where their mouth is. And by virtue of creating core competencies, adopting a code of ethics, and mandating an evaluation process for direct support professionals, in essence, we are meeting this 20-year-old suggestion, and it's a good day. Let's just real quickly take a look at that workforce transformation website, because if you're not familiar with it, and I assume many of you are familiar with it based on you listening to this webinar, because ultimately this webinar has its origins are through this workforce transformation project. If you go to workforce transformation, that's one word, see the one word right there, workforce transformation, www.workforcetransformation.org, which you'll find is this incredible website. It is a treasure chest, and within this treasure chest are remarkable resources for you as any person that's involved in developing direct support professionals, whether you're a trainer, an administrator, a frontline supervisor, a family member, whatever you are, whoever you are in our workforce system, within this website you'll find all types of goodies. Take a look. We look at the website. If you want a welcome, you can get about us and our friend Diane Hank, who is the Director of Workforce Transformation at OPWDD. She has a nice little welcoming note. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to give you a cursory tour through the website. Free trainings that are available in the various regions, the regional centers for workforce transformation. In New York State, we got 5 of them. And if you take a look in each of the regions, there's all types of upcoming free training. All kinds of good stuff. And again, you can peruse this at your own leisure. I'm not going to really get into that. Good news and recognition. There's all kinds of things happening across the New York State that should be celebrated, and you can read about what those things are. But here it is. This is probably the most important of the links within this website. It's your resource library. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but when you go through each of these subcategories, sublinks, within this website, you're going to find a treasure chest. If you take a look, you can look at all the videos, and manuals, and training materials that are available for you to use. Just all remarkable stuff. And if you haven't looked and perused this workforce transformation website, you should take some time and do that. It's loaded with good stuff. Resource library. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these sub areas, but what I'm going to do is show you where you're going to find, again, what today's webinar is about is the evaluation tools and the evaluation process. Oops, sorry, I'm getting mail. Take a look at core competencies and evaluation tools. If you go to that subcategory, that subsite, anything and everything that you need, particularly as a frontline supervisor or an administrator within the OPWDD system, it's here for you. All the documentation that you're going to need in terms of the actual evaluation tools are here and are downloadable. And I'll get into that right now. So take a look at this website when you do get a chance, because it is a valuable resource, and I would strongly encourage you to take some time and to certainly peruse it. Again, workforcetransformation.org is the website. I have an obligation to just take a few moments before we get into the evaluation tool and how to use it to demystify the DSP competencies. Perry Samowitz and I, my colleague, and who is the lead in Region 3. Perry Samowitz is the lead person in Region 3 of the Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation. We've developed over the course of the last year a really comprehensive training that deals with the evaluation tool, the evaluation process. But what we do, we always begin with demystifying these competencies. Why have competencies in the first place? Why should any profession have competencies? Well, in direct support, we're talking about transforming a direct support workforce. Well, the only way we're going to do that is by having core competencies, and you'll see that in a couple seconds. But do we need to transform the direct support workforce because it's terrible? No, that's not why we're doing this. That's not the reason we're having a workforce transformation, quote unquote. We're transforming the workforce to meet the demands of people with disabilities, what they want, family members of people with disabilities, what they want, the demands of the government, of the federal regulations that are coming to us through the community settings rule, what the regulations say. We have to transform our workforce from going from that caregiving modality, which there's nothing wrong with that per se, but we have to develop direct support professionals. And by doing that, we have to have some method for determining how a direct support professional is having success. How do we evaluate direct support professionals? How do we develop them? And we need tools that are useful in doing so. We need to bring direct support professionals to the professional table, quote unquote. Every profession has language and jargon and a lexicon and competencies which are referred to. And unless we help direct support professionals develop their language and evaluate them based on competencies, they'll never, ever be able to come to the professional table and be taken seriously. And that said, what you're going to see in a few moments, what these competencies represent are, this is going to be largely the language that direct support professionals need to use when they're interacting at the professional table, quote unquote. And there it is. We have to give a vocabulary to direct support professionals. That is the language of direct support. When we look at the competencies, and you're going to see on the next slide what they are, there's 23 of them. There's 23 competency areas that are housed within 7 goal areas. And I'll explain that and make that clear in just a few seconds. I guarantee after this session, I really believe you're going to welcome what we call competency-based direct support practice. Because right now, we focus on things that aren't necessarily related to competence when it comes to as we develop and evaluate direct support professionals. We believe there's 23 specific areas of skill that you're going to need to assess and monitored all the time with direct support professionals, but you're going to focus on nothing else in the process of that monitoring and that assessment and that evaluation and developing. There's nothing else to focus on. There really isn't. Oftentimes, we focus on things that are about discipline or things that deal with workplace conduct. And yeah, people need to show up on time. They need to not use their cell phone when they shouldn't be using their cell phone. They need to follow the policies and procedures of an organization. They need to follow the code of ethics, of course. But ultimately, that's bare minimum. When we look at the development and evaluation of direct support professionals, we have to look at their competency-based activities. See? Competency-based direct support. The process of evaluating, especially with the ongoing performance evaluation, whether it's initial evaluation or an annual evaluation, which we're going to clarify in a couple minutes, subjectivity can be taken from that. Because oftentimes we as frontline supervisors, we are people that have oftentimes have been promoted from the ranks, and suddenly over the course of a few years or several years working within an organization, we might be promoted to be evaluating people we once were peers with. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it can be positive. But we need to be less subjective and more objective. By that meaning, instead of evaluating people based on personality traits and characteristics of the people that we work with, we need to professionally evaluate direct support professionals. And by that takes subjectivity out of the game and puts objectivity into the mix. And the objectivity is defined for us. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of these competencies. That's the beauty of the evaluation tools you're going to see in just a little bit. And lastly, if you look at that last bullet, our responsibility, as I said before, is to develop direct support professionals all year long, not just an annual evaluation. We don't want to buy into that or make that mistake. Once a year I'll be evaluating a person that I supervise. No, if you think that once a year you evaluate your staff, A, you're mistaken, and B, that's dangerous. You need to evaluate on an ongoing basis. An annual evaluation, or even initial evaluation, as we're going to define in a couple seconds here, an annual evaluation should be the culmination of an ongoing year-long set of experiences and meetings and coaching and mentoring that you have with your staff. And we'll explain that in just a second. But back to this, we need to demystify these competencies and certainly the evaluations, and that's what the purpose of this webinar is. And here we go. I'm going to show a slide now. If you're not sitting, please sit, because what you're going to see in this slide, it's initially overwhelming. So here we go. Ready? There they are. There they are, my friends. A through W, 23 competencies. These are the broad catchment areas, if you will, that underlie the evaluation process that's being mandated by the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities in New York State. It's really incredible that New York State is doing this. I am so proud to be part of the development of this process. I'm the last one to tell you that I'm glad that there's a mandate out there, but you know what? I'm glad that there's a mandate out there that's going to make it so that direct support professionals finally, for the first time literally in history, are going to, at least in the United States, they're going to be mandated to be evaluated by specific core competencies, and here they are. And when you look at them, there's 23 of them, and again, as you initially look at this page of the 23 competencies, it's overwhelming. And I've been, as I train this around the state, I say, okay, you're looking at a forest right now. So when you look at a forest, you see obviously just this abundance of trees, and it can be overwhelming and maybe a little scary. But when you look at a forest and you kind of focus in and drill in to the individual trees in the forest, it's less scary, it's less intimidating. Let's just take a look. When you look at some of these competency areas, let's just take a look at this one here. Competency Area P, supporting health and wellness. Supporting health and wellness. Okay. Just think about the role of a direct support professional in supporting the health and wellness of the people that they work with. My goodness, I say that's a low-hanging fruit in that whether you're more of a custodial direct support professional or more of a supportive and supporting direct support professional, and I say those both with great respect, you are supporting people's health and wellness. You assist people that you support with eating and with choosing good food to eat and healthy food to eat. You assist people often with medication and taking medicine. Direct support professionals assist people on an ongoing basis with exercise. And supporting health and wellness is not limited to physical health and wellness. Emotional health and wellness fits in there too. And psychological health and wellness is in there too. When you look at supporting health and wellness, as you're going to see in the evaluation tool later on, there's specific skills and very specific tasks that go along with supporting health and wellness. But as a catchment area, supporting health and wellness, it's what we say, it's that low-hanging fruit. It's something that you can observe direct support professionals do if you're a supervisor, if you're a person that's going to be evaluating direct support professionals. It's something you can observe on a daily, I'd say hour-to-hour, almost minute-to-minute basis. So there's one. Yeah, that's not too intimidating, right? How about this one? S, supporting safety. I see this all the time when I visit organizations that are supporting people with developmental disabilities that employ direct support professionals. I'll be going into maybe, I visit day programs, I visit group home programs, and when I arrive, I'm often seeing people getting in and out of vehicles. That's a place, especially if you're supporting people with perhaps some physical disabilities, maybe people that use wheelchairs to get around. There's a lot that goes into supporting people's safety. For instance, say you're supporting somebody that uses a wheelchair and they're using an accessible vehicle, and there's a process by which, and you have to lock people in and strap people in and use the seatbelt restraint systems within accessible vehicles in a very specific way. And I watch direct support professionals, whether they're doing this or not. They usually get trained very specifically about how to do this, and depending what vehicle you're using, if you're using a wheelchair accessible van, or sometimes a conversion van, or sometimes even those big larger buses. Supporting safety is part and parcel to driving around, and when we drive people around. Supporting safety happens when somebody cleans up a spill. Say in somebody's residence or somebody's home, I don't know, mayonnaise spills on the floor. If mayonnaise spills on the floor and you don't clean it up pretty quickly, it could be a tripping hazard, a fall hazard. It's pretty obvious. I'm not going to insult your intelligence as you're listening to me, but supporting safety, it's abundant in terms of what you can watch, what you can observe in terms of evaluating direct support professionals, how competent they are in supporting safety. And if you just look at the list here, let's go to this kind of the left side here. Facilitating personal growth and development. That is much broader than something like supporting safety or supporting health and wellness, but facilitating people's growth and development, that's endless. But it's something that really, as a supervisor, as a mentor, as a teacher of direct support professionals, as a developer of direct support professionals, you can watch this happen to a greater or lesser degree. Do people, as direct support professionals, as you're observing them, do direct support professionals make dinner for people, or do they assist people in making dinner? Are they teaching people about the different kinds of oils you can use for salad dressing? Are they teaching people about the different kinds of knives you can use for cutting bread versus cutting tomatoes? Are people learning about different kinds of cuisine? Are the direct support professionals involved in facilitating people's personal growth and development around food? And I use that one as an example because it's something that direct support professional can be involved in 3 or 4 times a day around food. And so are direct support professionals feeding people, or are they teaching people how to eat? There's a big difference. And that said, when you look at all of these direct support core competencies, and when you do, we don't have time to do it right now because I want to get on to how to use the tools, the specific evaluation tools. But when you look at these individual competencies, they are rich. They are exciting ultimately, because when you look at a direct support professional, if they're doing these competency-based activities that you can observe, you can help them develop themselves as direct support professionals and help direct support professionals do these things in a greater, more abundant way with the people they support. Let's look at the various evaluation tools. Essentially, we can say let's say there's 4 tools, right? There's 4 tools without getting too confusing. There's 4 tools that you can use, and you'll need to start using them. Well, some of them you need to start using now, which I'll explain that, and some you're going to have to start using no later than April of 2017. And these tools are all created for you. You cannot modify them. You can add to them. You can add more to the evaluation process for direct support professionals if you choose to do that, but you can't modify the tools that exist, and I'll show you what they are in a second. So there's an initial tool, an initial direct support professional evaluation tool, which I'll show you. The initial evaluation tool, you needed to start to complete initial evaluations on direct support professionals who become employed by your provider organizations, or if you are employing a direct support professional, as of April of 2016. So 2 months ago, as of April 2016, you needed to start to begin the initial evaluation process with direct support professionals. That initial evaluation process is dependent on your organization or dependent on what you define as the initial period of employment for direct support professionals. That's not necessarily being dictated by OPWDD. Some organizations, maybe your initial evaluation period, your initial employment period might be a month. It might be 6 weeks. It might be 90 days, 3 months. It might be 6 months. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're using as the measure of a direct support professional's initial evaluation, you're going to be using this tool. Let's take a look at the tool right now, the initial evaluation tool. The initial evaluation tool, as I said, is available on the OPWDD website, but it's also available and probably easier to access on the Workforce Transformation website. And I'll show you what this is here in just a second. Okay, hold on. Okay. Here we go. Hold on. Come back to this. Bear with me here, folks. Okay. When you look at the initial evaluation you can download as a hard copy, or you can also download an Excel spreadsheet, an Excel package. When you look at the initial evaluation, I'm going to show you for the purposes of this webinar the Excel version. There it is. That's the cover. And I'm going to show you what this wheel means in just a second. What you're looking at in this wheel, this cover sheet, this is on the initial evaluation. It's also on the annual evaluation. These are the 7 goal areas. These 7 goal areas are where all those 23 competencies live. I'll explain that in just a minute. But when you look at the evaluation tool, I'm going to bring it down to, I think, 125%. It's probably easier for us to look at. Yes, here we go. And when you look at each page, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's your cover. Here's the instructions. Don't get upset. Don't start to shake and quiver. But when you look at these instructions, it's very clear, and it's very simple, believe it or not, the process of using this evaluation tool if you read these instructions. But when you look at them initially, it's again, it can kind of be intimidating and overwhelming. But I'm going to bypass these instructions. You can read them on your own. And here you go. This is pretty straight ahead. When you're filling out these this is the initial evaluation form. You're going to fill out all this stuff. It's pretty straight ahead. You know, I'm not going to again insult your intelligence there. Hold on here. Okay, we got this. So if you go to personal data, that's that. Now here we go. When we talk about, oops, I'm having mail come in here. I'm sorry about that. Should have turned my mail off. Let me just do that right away. Okay. When you look at putting people first, there's the goal area, which I'll explain in a second. But within each of the pages, each of the gold areas, you're going to see a page that all the competencies, there they are. They're in the gray shaded areas. In the solid black and white area is the goal area, which I'll explain later. But the competency areas, that's really what I want you to focus on from here forth. And when you look at the competency area, they're the same exact, I'll show you here, they're the same exact, there we go. Sorry, here we go. See that? Remember these? These are the 23 competency areas. When you look at them in context of the evaluation tool, here they are. They're shaded. So, competency area A, supporting a person's unique capacities, personality, and potential. That's straight ahead, right? I mean, that's you know, you can observe that. But when you look at the tool, we've also given you skills. Skills. So if you look at skill 1, demonstrates respect for all individuals being supported. So if you're, okay, you know, this brand new direct support professional, his name is Dan. So Dan, the brand new direct support professional, as you're evaluating him in this initial period, when you see, is he supporting people's unique capacities, personality, and potential? That's kind of broad. Well, you can say, is he skillful in demonstrating respect for the individuals that he supports? You can even drill down deeper, and this is what we've done. This is the condensed version. So that skill, with each of the competency areas comes a skill. But with each of the skill areas, watch this, when you put a cursor, when you download and use the Excel spreadsheet, when you put the cursor over the skill, you can take a look and you can see the different tasks that support this skill. So, does Dan communicate directly with people that he supports? Does he use person-first language when communicating about a person he supports? Does he use body language and eye contact to show attention to others' comments? Does he monitor his own tone of voice and his volume when providing instruction and direction to the individuals he supports? And does he assist individuals to dress and groom in a way that demonstrates their self-respect and their dignity as they present themselves to others in the community? If you take a look at that, within that first competency area, within the goal area of putting people first, when you look at that first skill, demonstrating respect for all individuals being supported, and then you look at all the tasks, my goodness, people, it's spelled out for you. It really can't be much clearer in terms of what you're going to be observing as a supervisor, as an evaluator for this guy Dan, you know, who's coming in to work for you. And trust me, we can go through each page. We don't have time to do that. But when you look at the different competency areas, the different skills, it's spelled out how you can be objective. You are measuring Dan based on these skills, these competencies. Now, you got to take it one step further. How do you rate? How do you rate Dan in all of these tasks, these skills, and these competencies? Well, there's a gradient. Does Dan meet the standards? If you take a look where the cursor is he making progress? Does he not meet the standards? That is pretty self-explanatory, but let me just clarify. There are certain things that aren't applicable. When you see these shaded areas, you have no choice but to give the evaluation if he's meeting a standard, if he's not, if he's making progress, or if he's not meeting a standard. It's not acceptable to be non-applicable that he's demonstrating respect for individuals being supported. Okay? Now, what does meeting standard mean? What does making progress mean? That's something that I think we have to define, and you certainly have to define as an organization. We believe that very strongly. You have to come up with your definition of what meeting standard means, what making progress means. This is the gradient evaluation level for the initial evaluation. It's a little different for the annual evaluation, which I'll explain when we look at that in a few minutes. But when you look at the initial evaluation, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 months, whatever your initial evaluation period is for the people that you hire as direct support professionals, does Dan meet the standard of demonstrating respect for all individuals supported? Is he meeting these tasks? Either he is or he isn't. And if he is, he's doing pretty well. Maybe he is struggling a little bit with communicating directly with the individuals. Maybe he is struggling using body language and eye contact to show attention to people's comments. So maybe he's making progress in the area. That's where you have to determine, and that's where probably the highest level of subjectivity comes in to this rating process. But the bottom line here is that in the initial evaluation process, as you look at each and every of these goal areas and of the competencies, take a look. When you look at them all, it is overwhelming. I'm not going to deny that when you look at this tool, there's lots to do, it seems. I'm here to tell you, and I'm going to show you something that Perry and I kind of came up with. It's kind of Perry Samowitz's method of doing evaluations. I'll explain that in a little bit. But when you really look at each of these pages, once you get to build your muscles and to see everything that a direct support professional does through these 23 competencies, it's going to be remarkably efficient and, believe it or not, easier to develop and evaluate your direct support professionals versus what we've done in the past. And I'll say what that is in a second. The last page of the initial evaluation is the supervisory summary. There's a narrative page which you can take a look at too. That's pretty straight ahead. I do want to give you some advice. If a direct support professional is meeting standards, you're really not going to make any comments. Comments are optional, as you can see. You're going to make comments if a direct support professional is making progress or is not meeting standards. You're not going to make comments if they're meeting the standards. If they're meeting the standards, all is said by virtue of the evaluation tool. If they're making progress, you might want to say something about Dan. Dan needs to work a little bit closer with understanding that when he uses his body language and when he makes eye contact with people, maybe he needs to make eye contact with the people he supports a little bit more often and not cross his arms when he is talking in team meetings. Something like that. You'd want to write a comment that's going to support what Dan needs to do to meet the standard. Got it? So making progress, if you're going to mark that off, that's a place where you make a comment. And certainly if he's not meeting a standard, you certainly want to write how he can do that. See what I'm talking about? When it comes to the narrative piece at the very end, you're going to build on his strengths. The areas for improvement are going to be things that are where he's making progress or does not meeting standard. That's where you're going to write about areas for his improvement. The areas not yet addressed, plan for the employee development. Those are things that, again, you need to develop your own, I guess, your own narrative. I would say a plan for an employee's development is going to be something that you probably have done as supervisors before. But what I would say, what I would suggest is utilize the competencies and the structure of the competencies in order to create that plan. You don't want to create a plan that isn't using the language of the core competencies. Okay. There's your initial. Just get rid of this for a second here. Let's go to the annual evaluation. And if we go to the annual evaluation, it's very similar to the initial evaluation with a couple things that are different. Watch this. Here's your cover. Here's your annual evaluation. Looks identical other than it says annual as opposed to initial. Here's where it differs. All the competencies are exactly the same. The goal areas, exactly the same. Skills, exactly the same. But what's different are the ways in which we rate. So let's go to Dan. Dan, the direct support professional who had his initial evaluation done. He has been working with the organization for a year, so it's time for his annual evaluation. So here it is. Here's his annual evaluation. And, you know, Dan, remember he had that plan to create more eye contact with the people he supports and not cross his arms and use more, I guess, open body language when he's at team meetings. Well, he had a plan on that, and guess what? He's really improved. So not only is he's meeting these standards now, he's exceeding the standards. Maybe he took a class in body language. He took a class in how eye contact, when done, will improve the relationships you have with people with disabilities. I don't know, whatever. But you know, he's exceeding. He's exceeding what he has been assigned to do and given a plan to do in terms of demonstrating his respect for the individuals being supported. So he goes beyond meeting the standard. So here you go. Here's the difference between the two different evaluation tools. Instead of meeting the standard, he is exceeding the standard. Instead of making progress, he's meeting the standard. So does not meet still applies. So if Dan is not doing what you've planned for him to do and he's not meeting that plan, he's not meeting, that's pretty straight ahead. He's not meeting what you have planned for him to do. If he's meeting, it means he's met what you've asked him to do. But what I've said is that he's exceeding what you've asked him to do by taking some classes, and you're observing him in team meetings much more open and using eye contact. See what I'm getting at? By exceeding, let me just put the two together here. I'll show you. I'll do a comparison. Okay, take a look at this. 100%. I'm going to juxtapose these. Bear with me. If I was in a classroom, I would have this up on a smartboard. But you see, here's the initial evaluation. Meets standards, making progress, does not meet. Here's the exact same competency area, same goal area. Exceeds, meets standards, does not meet. See the difference? When these tools were created, it was our thinking and the thinking of OPWDD that nobody within the first few months of their employment is going to exceed and be an exemplar of a professional. It just doesn't happen. They need some time to adjust and to get themselves to a place where they understand what it means to meet standards. We believe this: meeting standards, meeting the standards, the competencies, the skills, the tasks. If you meet them, you're good. You're really good. This is a high bar. This is a high bar set. And if you're exceeding some of these standards, that's a wonderful thing. We probably are not going to see a lot of direct support professionals exceeding in all of these 23 areas, and certainly all these pretty much hundreds of skills and tasks. They're not going to. If they are, clone them, and we should probably, get a we should do something to make sure this person can be replicated all throughout the world. They're not. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. When you take a look at this point, the evaluation tools, we'll come back to this. When you look at that initial 3 months or 6 months, and again, that's dependent on your organization. Are they meeting standards? Are they making progress? Are they not meeting? We need to see if a person is meeting standards in their annual evaluation every year. If they're meeting standards, they need to be celebrated, they need to be thanked, and they're doing well. If they're exceeding standards, and hopefully you're not handing those exceeds out like candy to the skills and to the competencies that you're going to be evaluating on the tool. If they're exceeding a number of the standards, then that's great. But we're hoping for a workforce that's meeting the competencies that have been created, because if they're meeting the competencies and the skills that have been dictated by OPWDD, my goodness, they are absolutely they are keepers, and they're direct support professionals that we want in our midst. Real quickly, let's just go back to the tools that are available. So when you take a look at the two other tools, I'm sorry I'm going all around here, but it's the nature of this webinar and finding all the tools. There's another couple tools we just need to talk about real briefly. It's the family and individual evaluation tools. We go back to the Workforce Transformation website, which is workforcetransformation.org. We go to the resource library. We go to core competencies evaluation tools. We go down to the evaluations for individuals, family members, or other advocates. We have a lot of community habilitation direct support professionals out there now who don't have there's not a strong supervisory presence. If there is a supervisory presence, it's minimal. Or family members or people that receive perhaps self-directed services, they're going to be the ones that are going to evaluate direct support professionals. So we wanted to create a tool that was a little bit less complicated to understand and a little bit more accessible. So we have both a written tool and an evaluation tool. And I'll explain what those are in just a second. Here's the written tool. Take a look at it. And when we look at the written tool, the directions for use are right there. And kind of the parameters of how and when to use this are there. But when you look at this tool, it's terrific because they're very kind of open-ended questions for a supervisor or a family member or an individual receiving supports. These are wonderful questions to ask oneself or the direct support professional about what the work is that they do. And they're all based on the goal areas and the competencies that have been derived by OPWDD. I strongly encourage you to take a look at this tool more in depth. Again, in an hour-long webinar, I didn't have time to go into great detail to all these tools. But if you take a look at the written tool, it's pretty straight ahead. When you look at the other tool, take a look at this. The interview tool. This was created specifically to use as a basis for filling out the individual tool. And what these are questions. Again, more open-ended questions to really get kind of the juices flowing to address the evaluation that you want to do with a direct support professional who's working in those kind of, I guess, not so residential environments or the traditional environments. And again, if you look at the interview questions, it's just a wonderful document to help you with the process of evaluating direct support professionals in those kind of non-traditional settings. We're almost at the end of our time here, and I'm sorry we didn't really get a chance to go too deep into the tools, but I don't think we need to. I really don't think we need to. What I think we need to do is this. You need to understand that there are 7 goal areas. There are 23 competency areas. They're all the skill statements. They're all the tasks that are in the hundreds. These, my friends, are your new direct support professional competency lenses. And ultimately, when you view and filter what you're observing your direct support professional do, whether you're a person receiving support, a supervisor, a family member, it really doesn't matter. When you're viewing that person, that direct support professional, through these lenses here essentially, you will get to the point where you can see that a person's meeting the standard, not meeting the standard, or exceeding the standard. And that is going to be how we're going to transform our workforce. And the only way we can do that is by you, as those that are doing the evaluation, understand the importance of the competencies and all the things that we've listed today. Remember, the purpose of this workforce transformation is to really to help direct support professionals, help them up their game as professionals. It's only possible if you buy into, quote unquote, what we have established, what OPWDD has mandated. We see it as a mandate, but we have to see it beyond the mandate. We have to see it as something that the people we support will ultimately benefit from. Please don't hesitate to contact anybody that is listed on the Workforce Transformation website, all the regional leads, Diane Hank, myself, Joe Macbeth, Perry Samowitz. We're all of our contact information is embedded in the Workforce Transformation website. I want to thank you, and I don't know, Tanya, I don't know if we have any questions. I think it's probably too late to ask questions, but I'm sure what we can do over the course of the response of this webinar is maybe do a follow-up webinar or something like that that goes maybe even deeper into the evaluation tool. I just wanted to give a broad overview today of the evaluation tool, the competencies, and our mandate. So, Tanya, anything else from your end, on your end that you can hear or see?
John, we do have one question. Does the Certified Group DAHAB program need to use the AD family and individual evaluation tool?
Which I would recommend you do. You go to the Workforce Transformation website, go to Frequently Asked Questions. I'm not going to get into the specific response to that. It's all there. It should be all there. If it's not there in terms of what evaluation tool to use for what forum or for what setting, then you would want to do a contact to OPWDD. I think some of these, some of the suggestions for which tools to use still being solidified, but if you go to the Frequently Asked Questions section of the, and I'll just put it up right now real quickly to the website here.
Perfect. And we also have another very similar question to that as well.
Yep.
In closing, I would like to say that this is being funded by OPWDD, so I will be sending out evaluations for this webinar. Please fill them out and return them to Kirsten. It really allows us to receive funding for projects like this.
Got it. And just real quickly, Tanya, and whoever was asking the question about the certified day settings, and I don't care what setting you're in. If you go to the Workforce Transformation website, go to the Frequently Asked Questions, and there they are. There's a ton of questions that will be answered. And if you take a look at explain the 3 DSP performance evaluation tools, and you take a look at these, the performance evaluations subcategory, that's where you're going to find your answers. If you don't find the answers there, I'd be A, surprised, and B, then you do contact. So you can contact whomever you'd like in whatever region you'd like. Okay?
Perfect. Thanks so much, John. We really appreciate it. It was a great presentation.
Well, thanks so much, and thank you, everybody. Have a good day.